Good morning, everyone. To celebrate the fact that G has had one of her adverts used, I give you a cake.
Good morning. You've reached Charles. How can we help today?
I'm disgusted about the result of last night's talent contest. The vote was clearly rigged to ignore what the callers wanted. It's disgraceful the way they overlook our views just to fill their stupid quotas.
Oh, really? I'm sorry. Do you mind if I put you on hold for a moment? It's mine now. I'm terribly sorry about the inconvenience. You were saying?
Yeah, it's like no matter who we vote for, the people who organise things will rig it to make sure they get the result they want. It's always the same.
I know what you mean. It often feels like your views aren't being taken into account. Be it an election, referendum, or talent show vote. All the systems are flawed.
Oh, well, I wouldn't know about that. I never really bothered to vote in elections.
Really? But you're happy to pay for the talent show contests?
Well, yeah, I feel like I've got the chance to influence something there. At least when they ain't rigging the whole damn contest to help some talent there's no hope or with a sub-story to reach the final. But in the elections, it makes no difference who I vote for. Never really changes anything. I guess with politics, at least you know that it won't end up being a choice between a group of talentless no-hopers.
You don't really follow politics very closely, do you?
Well, I did try for the last election, but frankly, it's a lot easier to understand why some idiot wins a talent show than some other idiot who 70% of the people didn't even vote for.
I actually agree with that caller. I don't really follow politics that much anymore. They're all the same. The only way to tell them different is by the colour of their tie.
Well, none of the women wear ties.
Ah, yes, of course. I was forgetting about the large number of women currently getting opportunities at the highest level of modern politics.
Well, I think everyone should vote in elections. It affects everyone, even if you don't think it makes any difference.
Yeah, damn right. Vote early, vote often.
I always thought that was a weird thing to say. I mean, voting often is illegal. You're only allowed to vote once. And does it matter what time of the day we vote really makes a difference?
Well, it certainly does for me. First thing in the morning, I'm a real hard-line right-winger, you know, in favour of introducing capital punishment for coughing in a public place. But once I get a good cup of coffee and a full English inside me, I'm the most moderate liberal ever.
Oh yeah, you're a real ray of sunshine all day.
Of course, when it gets into the evening and I've had a couple of drinks, then my politics get pretty unpredictable.
Personally, I like to leave it as late as possible to vote.
Why?
Well, if I'm the last person to vote, then my vote could be the one that swings the entire election.
Do any of you actually know who's supposed to have popularised that slogan?
No, not really. Obama, I guess?
Not exactly. It was Al Capone. Well, I think it's quite entertaining to think that a slogan promoting electoral fraud and voting before election day is being used by so many people to encourage young people to vote.
Well, let's face it, it doesn't matter who you vote for. The government always gets in anyway.
You are so cynical.
Yeah, John, how can you be so uncaring about politics? The suffragettes died for our right to vote. Does their sacrifice mean nothing to you?
Well, actually, G, I don't believe they did.
How can you say that? How can you ignore everything they did?
Gee, you're kind of overlooking the fact that John knows a true secret to a lifetime of power and influence.
What? Really? What is it?
Being born with the Y chromosome.
What's your political views then, Zandra?
Well, personally, I like my parliament like I like my men.
Well hung.
Nope.
White, old and middle class?
No! Hypocritical, self-serving, desperate to screw me at every opportunity.
Hello, it's Georgina. You've reached... What can I help you to complain about today?
Good morning. I wish to register my dissatisfaction with the politicians in this country.
Oh, yeah?
Indeed. I am a member of the civil service. Our current minister is just totally self-interested. All he cares about is tomorrow's headlines. Sometimes I think he'd rather keep hold of his majority than make any reforms. Mind you, the rest of the service isn't much better. Frankly, and I shouldn't be saying this, some of my superiors are absolute dinosaurs, all assuming that just because we did something one way yesterday, that's the way we should do it tomorrow. They think that a revolutionary new policy is exactly the same as the old policy, but it's delivered wearing a different tie.
But surely they must realise that things need to change.
You'd think so, but no. Every time I try to suggest a new approach, they just won't listen.
That's shocking. But isn't there any way to go around them? Like, can't you suggest things directly to the minister?
Oh, it's not that easy. The more senior civil servants won't let him go for a walk around our department just in case he somehow manages to have an original thought.
You make him sound like a prisoner.
Well, we did have a discussion a few years back about whether there was any way to keep the ministers stuck in their departments overnight and at the weekend to make sure they couldn't talk to anyone unsupervised.
Seriously?
Sadly, it turned out that locking them in the building was too much trouble, so we ended up just giving them so many files to read that they don't have time to speak to anyone when they get home. I believe it has actually helped several of them to maintain very happy marriages. One time I did manage to slip a suggestion through to him. He insisted on announcing it to the press in advance, and in a such moronic way that he succeeded in annoying both his opponents and his own supporters. It was a total disaster.
So, what can we do to change the system?
Oh, we can't. Frankly, it's a lost cause. I'll do what everyone does and stick around a couple more years to get some more contacts. Then retire and take up a directorship at some big company based on claiming that I can influence key figures in the government and civil service. Should add a few extra zeros to the paycheck.
Well, quite frankly, I don't think it matters who you vote for. This country is really run by an unelected, unaccountable group who are able to control the politicians and make up the laws to suit themselves.
Oh, yeah, you mean the Freemasons or the Illuminati?
No, the civil service.
Oh, I was just speaking with a civil servant. He did complain about his minister. He said he was too worried about what the public were going to think of him to actually introduce any policies that would benefit the country.
Oh, yeah, for the good of the country. By which they really mean for the good of people like themselves. Old, rich, white and male.
Old, rich, white and male. Sounds like every current MP.
Or Xandra's ideal date.
Most of your boyfriends subscribe to the civil servants school of dating then?
In the sense that I don't know their names, almost never see them, and have no clue what they're doing. Yeah, that sounds about right.
Well, that's exactly why I don't like the civil service having so much influence. We have no idea who they are and no way of holding them to account for their decisions.
Well, in fairness, it didn't sound like he liked the rest of the civil service much either. It sounds like they just keep taking the same old ways of doing things because that's what got us this far.
Well, of course, if you're driving towards a solid brick wall, then it makes much more sense to keep accelerating. Braking and steering are overrated.
Hello, Alexandra here. How can I help?
Good afternoon, my name is Justin Oilsby, and I would like to complain about the most amazing waste of money and electricity. There was a recent story that leaving lights on acted as a deterrent to burglars, and this has been widely implemented.
Oh, yes, I remember that.
Well, I have recently discovered that at one building where they have started leaving the lights on, the electricity bill has increased by £7 million in just a few months.
Well, that's incredible. It must be an enormous building to have something incredibly valuable inside.
It's actually the Department of Energy and the Environment.
So the Department of the Environment is leaving the lights on all night?
Exactly. And can you guess what they were planning to use the 7 million quid that they just wasted on? Building a new wind farm, which they had to scrap because they don't have the money. And they're trying to hush up the story.
Oh yes, Mr. Oilsby. And are you hoping to persuade the department to change their policy?
Absolutely not. I've just called all the national newspapers and told them about it. I want everyone to know about it, and for it to be headline news tomorrow.
But surely it would be kinder and more effective to quietly get the policy changed, rather than washing his dirty linen all over the place?
My dear girl, politics is all about washing dirty linen in public. In politics, you have to throw a few people to the wolves.
Even if one of them is one of your colleagues, the Minister of the Environment?
Well, of course.
Surely you should be working together for a common goal.
You're only colleagues for 1 month, every 4 years, when the common goal is winning the election. The rest of the time, my biggest rivals are the rest of my party. After all, they're the ones I'm competing with for the top job. Got to go now. Lots of journalists to speak with.
What a hypocrite. That politician who was on the front pages today is trying to spread negative stories about his colleagues just to get himself out of the limelight.
Well, it seems reasonable to me. After all, the papers are so obsessed with criticism that the only way to deal with criticism is by giving them ammunition on other people.
Well, newspapers would be pretty dull if there was no political scandals to expose.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if there were no scandals, then journalists would have to report on policies, and those would require a degree of understanding and explanation, rather than the usual shtick of knee-jerk righteous anger.
And could you imagine the front pages? Politician found to be vaguely acceptable at his job. No one will ever buy a newspaper again.
But surely politicians should be working to improve policies, not just trying to get each other sacked.
Well, again, Minister out on his ear makes for a much better headline than government realises bad idea was a bad idea. If the government gets rid of a bad idea, then there's very little opportunity for burning effigies in the streets.
And if some backbencher or junior minister wants a top ministerial position, then they first need to figure out how to create a vacancy above them.
Exactly. The best way to climb the greasy pole is to clamber over the bodies of your colleagues.
Hello, you've reached Charles. What do you want to talk about?
I want to complain about the council's inappropriate use of public funds. They want to spend £3 million to protect our village from flooding.
Well, that does seem a bit expensive, but surely it's worth it.
But the nearest river is more than 3 miles away and hasn't flooded at any time during the last 10 years. And our region is famous for being the driest place in the UK.
It does seem they're being a bit too cautious.
It gets better. Listen to their genius plan to save us from flooding. They plan to dig a deep ditch right round the village, then pile all of the earth from the ditch up inside the village and rebuild all our houses on top of it.
What?
Yes, that was our reaction. So we had a vote of no confidence in them and managed to vote them out of office. So now I've got a position on the council and can veto that plan. Instead, we're going to try to visit a few other places to see how they deal with the issue of flooding.
That seems a bit more sensible. Where are you going to be going? Somerset? The Highlands?
No, we will in fact be going to the south of Spain. After all, you never hear about them having any problems with flooding. They must have worked out some excellent system to prevent it. The entire council will be going on this trip in order to learn as much as possible. Well, we do have £3 million in the budget to spend. Adios.
Thank you.
God, I needed that. I owe you.
I'll add it to the list. Interview didn't go well then?
Nah, keep being too honest.
God, what did you tell them this time?
Well, it was one of those recruitment agencies, you know? Send them your CV and they find you a totally inappropriate job. Well, when they asked why I wanted the job, I said I figured as the job involved finding work for other people, once I was there, I might be able to find myself something better pretty quickly.
Once again, your commitment to the ideals of truth and honesty in the face of common sense and logic, admirable. Bloody stupid, but admirable. While I commend your desire to ensure that your future employer doesn't get a false representation of your true character, there might be a small bit of deception might be needed if you actually want them to become your future employer.
Whoever said honesty is the best policy never tried using it in a job interview.
Probably some philosopher whose only job would be sitting down getting drunk all the time, then getting someone to write down whatever ramblings he came out with under the guise of mystic wisdom.
Doesn't sound like a bad job.
So you fancy being a philosopher for the night?
Why not? Although a certain someone is going to have to subsidise my philosophising.
Once you get a job, I'm not going to have to buy a drink for about 7 months. Fine, I'll get the drinks. Anyway, I hate thinking on my own.